30 years of blah, 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 and where has that led us?
Welcome to today's show, where we hear more from the author and activist Donnachadh McCarthy. On last night's Meaning It, he was telling us how the billionaire media holds even the most senior politicians in the palm of its hands. And even as we were speaking, Prime Minister Boris Johnson was flying straight from the COP, where he'd just talked impressively about the urgency of climate action, to London to dine with his climate skeptic friends, journalists from the right-wing Daily Telegraph. So did Johnson really mean anything he just said at the COP?
So we have a Prime Minister, finally, Boris went to COP giving quite a good speech in terms of the urgency. He's talking about 1 minute to midnight. It's a good, really urgent. He's fine. He's speaking from the right hymn sheet on that front. However, behind that Prime Minister, there's a government not implementing anything. And the key person for implementing action on climate would be our Chancellor, i.e. the Treasury. However, around 6 months ago, Boris started ramping up a bit of the rhetoric because he's the president of the COP, United Kingdom's president of the COP. So he gave speeches last year, last autumn, during the winter and in the spring, outlining some small modest steps that the United Kingdom would take to net zero. I mean, a disastrously bad plan, but it was a plan. It was Boris's famous, or I would call infamous, 10-point plan. Most of which was based on technology and was most based on investments that would come, if they came to any fruition, would be in the 2040s, 2050s, far too late for any real action. But they were talking about phasing out fossil fuel cars, fossil fuel boilers at some stage in the future. And it was called the Net Zero Agenda. So then around in the middle of the summer, the Global Warming Policy Foundation was another think tank, Fairfield UK, another think tank, went on the warfare, and there's a real, around 3 weeks, blitz in the UK media about how awfully expensive net zero was, how what a terrible thing Boris was doing, and they kept blatantly saying to Boris, you can go to COP, you can make these statements, but don't you dare implement them. I mean, literally said it in black and white. It's okay to have the rhetoric, but don't you dare implement it. And parallel to that, there was a huge double-page spreads very clearly stating to Rishi Sunak, don't you dare put this into the budget. And the implication was very clear that if Boris Johnson kept on with this madcap net zero climate action and Rishi Sunak didn't take action on net zero, they were literally between the lines saying we can replace Johnson with Sunak, just like they replaced Turnbull with Morrison. So that was very clearly happened this summer. Nobody wrote about it in the media. And then subsequent to that, that went on for around 3 or 4 weeks. And
but how do you know about this, Donnachadh?
I've been involved in politics in Britain for 30 years. I'm a former deputy chair of the Liberal Democrats. I saw from the inside how the media blackmails, threatens, twists arms of what entire political parties do. I've seen it, and so therefore, having experienced it, I can see it happening today, and I can interpret it, and it's very clear. The smoke signals were very clear.
It's certainly true that at a certain point, not that long ago, I remember listening to various people saying, and I could see it, oh, I wonder if Rishi's going to be our next PM. So obviously they were getting the message, but not necessarily in the critical way that you were, but they were getting the message they were meant to get.
Absolutely. And that's their power. They're kingmakers. They really are kingmakers, and they're king destroyers. They're regicides as well as kingmakers. So that happened during the summer. Then it went quiet. Then Rishi went to the Conservative Party conference before COP. Didn't make one mention of the climate emergency, despite all of the reports that had come this summer, the disastrous extreme weather, the reports from the Chatham House, the reports from the IPCC, the reports from the World Meteorological, like disastrous reports saying that we are in code red from the United Nations. He didn't mention it. That's unprecedented. That's unprecedented, I'd say, for 20 years by any chancellor in the United Kingdom. And then, even more importantly, he came to the budget. Didn't mention it once. Didn't mention it once. That was the week before COP. He cut fuel duty again for the 10th time. So cars are going to be cheaper. And he cut aviation duty. So aviation duty is going to be cheaper. So he has obeyed his masters in the newspapers. So if Boris goes out on a limb and tries to implement any of this net zero stuff, he's ready and waiting and has auditioned and has passed the test to be an anti-net zero chancellor. And that's how this is, why is this important? Because other leaders saw what Boris is doing. So what Boris is able to do is lie about about our commitment to climate action, lie about the steps we will take as a country, and they see behind the scenes we're doing the opposite. We're opening oil fields, gas fields, airports, roads. We're cutting duties on aviation. We're cutting duties on fossil fuels. So if I'm Modi, or if I'm Turkey, or if I'm Saudi Arabia, I go, yeah, I'll promise 2050, I'll promise 2060. It doesn't matter, because look at Boris. He's lying through his teeth. Because that is what the media are actually doing in this country. And that hasn't got implications for this country, but it has global implications, because it has seriously damaged the momentum of the COP process. The most important thing to remember about the United Kingdom is that we're like a we're like a publican. So the publican has actually looked after. He's actually halved his own alcohol consumption. But the United Kingdom is a seller of alcohol. What do I mean by that? 15% of global investments in new fossil fuels come from the City of London. 2 oil companies are investing hundreds of billions of pounds. 2 British oil companies, Shell and BP, are investing so much money, it's twice the carbon emissions of the United Kingdom. And then we're over 50% of the global insurance market for fossil fuels, coal, oil and gas. And finally, we're a major center for the PR agency that actually put huge amounts of effort through the media to get social permission and greenwashing for the banks, the fossil fuel banks, and for the fossil fuel corporations. So if you look at the United Kingdom as a whole, per person, we're probably 15 times more responsible than almost any country in the world, because we are a massive center of the global fossil fuel industry that people never talk about. So when people talk about China, China is responsible for direct emissions mainly because it's become the manufacturing center for the world. So they export a lot of their emissions. But the United Kingdom is a center of the investment industry, insurance industry, and PR industry that actually runs and motors the fossil fuel industry across the planet. And so that's why we have a massive carbon footprint that's never attributed to us.
This is so shocking. I'm speechless. And, you know, I read a lot about climate stuff and hear a lot about it. And
you hear about China.
Yeah.
That's the Overton window, because that's what the tabloids say. No point in us, because we're only a tiny 1% of the global fossil fuel. Britain is irrelevant. Even if we get rid of all our emissions, it won't make any difference, because only a tiny 1%. It's China, China, China. That is the Overton window that you and I they've tried to box us into, and they have successfully boxed huge amounts of the public to take that farce. Another example of the power of the Overton window.
So if I've understood what Donnachadh just said, we need to look not only at the UK's direct emissions, but also at the far more massive indirect effect that the UK's financial sector has on the climate through its support of the fossil fuel industry via investment, insurance, and propaganda. How do these financiers get away with it? By using the media to manipulate the Overton window, which is what frames the issues and opinions the public finds acceptable at any given time, So how can we activists open the Overton window wider to give the public better options?
Well, I think something I found after I was involved in national politics, I was very angry at the establishment not hearing my demands that they be truthful and be honest and transparent. But it's only when I came out is that I realized that actually human beings and organizations are resistant to change. And there is a reason for that. If we have dramatic change in our lives every day of the week, we lose our home, we lose our family, we lose our life. It's not possible. So actually, in a healthy organism, you have to have stability. But you also have to be open to change, and then you have to be open to radical change if there's an emergency. And how I try and get that across to people is, yeah, I don't know, if you're, let's say a person's in a relationship, they're married, so they need to have stability for that relationship to survive. So that's the 70%. It's called the 70-25-5 theory. But if they do the same thing every day, and they always go same place on holiday, they always go same pub, they always have the same conversation, they never meet anybody different, the relationship dies. So there has to be always a renewal for a healthy relationship. And then finally, if the relationship becomes abusive or violent, they either have to get help or they have to get out of there fast. So that applies to individuals, applies to couples, applies to organizations, applies to countries. And the higher you go up in complexity of organization, the more inbuilt there will be resistance to change. Because that's what protects the organism. So our job as environmentalists is to say we're in the 5% danger zone. And we have to say it is safe to run out of that burning house. That there isn't an empty moat outside the door, there isn't a car going 100 miles per hour, there isn't bankruptcy, there isn't starvation. Because we're saying the current model is killing us. And they're saying, well, it's fed us, it's housed us, it's brought billions out of poverty, and you're saying there's something wrong with it? So that's what we have to remember, is that's our role. We are the alarm ringers of that 5%. And the resistance to us, and the media in some ways represents that resistance, because basically the billionaire class have benefited, they've seen how the current economic systems and structures and an exploitative economy has actually enabled them to be wealthy, has society become richer every year for the last 100 years, but at a cost invisible that's destroying us. So if we're going to finish, I would just like to say something positive about what we can do about this, rather than just be... so I'm arguing that when whatever movement you're in the climate movement, whether you're in a lobbyist, whether you're a politician, whether you're a campaigner, whether you're an NGO, whenever you're doing any action, think, should we invite the media to this in terms of the decision makers, the editors, the owners, the decision makers, or should we target them as one of our targets to remember that there is a fourth pillar of the movement that should be included? So that's my first appeal to people, whatever organization they're in. What are we doing that is actually addressing the fourth pillar to get it on our side? Then the second thing I would say to people is that think of what access to other kinds of media that do we have, because media isn't just the billionaire media. It's the most important one. But if you have a local council, they may have buses, they have bus shelters, they have tube stations, they have train stations, they may have doctors' surgeries, they have town halls, they have newsletters, they have their own charitable newsletters. There's a million ways where there are other media. And to actually start getting the message out there about what people need to do in terms of radically cutting their own carbon emissions and who they need to lobby in their local community or government to make change, or to lobby the media to take this on. Every media we should be asking every media organization to have on their front page a climate section, a button that says climate. And every media must train all of their journalists in every department on climate literacy, so that we actually change the media. We can actually positively, even without the billionaire media, we can actually positively take huge amount of action with all the other forms of media to get us rolling and to win this battle. We've got to win the media to actually expand the Overton window so that my lifestyle is normal and it's not extreme. People regard the fact that I've got, that I don't buy new clothes, that my house is at 18 degrees, that I only heat the room I'm in, I only like the room I'm in, that I cycle to work. They regard that as extreme. That's how the media will try and brand an eco-responsible lifestyle. I would argue any kind of lifestyle other than mine that actually trashes the planet, trashes future generations, that is the definition of extremism. And that's what we need to do, is to reverse, through the Overton window, through our work with the media, to reverse what's extreme and what's socially normal, so that we can actually adopt a lifestyle that's in line with saving the planet.
It totally makes sense, because we've been living in this kind of looking glass world that the picture we've been given, and we need to walk back through the glass and see reality again.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
No, it's very kind of you. Thank you.
So when Chancellor Sunak talked this week at the COP about rewiring the financial system, was he acknowledging and answering Donnachadh's point about the hefty scale of the UK's real climate impact? It doesn't seem so. He's leaving the market, which has never cared much about human rights or nature's rights, to determine if the transition plans put forward by business are credible. Charlie Cronick of Greenpeace is unimpressed. This COP demands transformative action in the financial sector, he says, but the Chancellor has arrived with a marketing slogan. And these young activists at the COP clearly don't believe the Chancellor either.
Tax breaks for fossil fuel companies. Can you let me know why you're giving tax breaks for fossil fuel companies? Can you let me know when you're giving tax breaks? When do you stop funding? There's not much in that suitcase, is there? Where's the climate finance, Rishi?
So that's it for tonight's show, except for this hilarious satire from Australia on the gap between what politicians say and what they really mean. It's shared with us by the ever-brilliant but very sweary Juice Media.
Hello, bonjour, futsak, salam, kami, banjingam. I'm from the Australian Government with a message for the world as we gather in Glasgow for this crucial climate summit. Fuck you. Over the coming days, our prime marketer will be there trying to shake a lot of hands and saying a lot of blah 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 like we're reducing emissions and net zero by 2050. But for those of you not fluent in Cantonese, the official language of the Australian government, what he's saying is, fuck you. We'll keep digging, burning and exporting fossil fuels, let you do the hard work and then take all the credit. Fick dick inskani. We have lots of experience at this because that's what we do back home, where we let the states and territories build renewables, subsidise EVs and retire coal plants, while we obstruct renewables, shit-talk EVs and subsidise coal plants, and then take credit for reducing emissions. We even take credit when those reductions are due to policies the opposition introduced when it was in office. Policies we scrapped, causing emissions to rise again. Sometimes we even take credit for things nobody does, like carbon credits for not clearing land that wasn't ever going to be cleared anyway. If a tree isn't cut down in a forest, does it make a sound? Why yes, cha-ching. All that might sound like we do nothing, but we're actually very busy. Our Environment Minister just opened 3 coal mines in a single month, whilst appealing a court ruling that she has a duty of care towards children over climate change. And our Minister for Emission Reduction, yes, that's really his title, is supporting massive new gas projects that'll contribute a cubic shit ton of emissions to the world not meeting the Paris target. The equivalent of 46 more coal plants. That's 3 more than the 43 new coal plants China's planning to build. We really are overachievers. Or as you Italians might say, siamo dei gran stronzi. What's that? How can we be expanding fossil fuels now that we've announced net zero by 2050? Oh, sweetheart, we can precisely because of net zero by 2050. Does it come with a policy? Nope. Is it binding? Nope. Does it rely on technologies that work or even fucking exist? Nah. But does it distract from what we're doing this decade? You betcha. And don't think we're the only ones. Am I right, Norway? Nice huge gas exports you got there. Hey, Canada, America, loving that Line 3 pipeline you guys just expanded. UK, nice new oil rigs you got ready to go there in the North Sea. Russia, baby, we see you doing fuck all. And to all the other governments attending, we know you want to punch us in the face for obstructing every COP since Kyoto. But hey, as long as you keep buying our coal and gas exports, we know you secretly love us for it. Most Australians are profoundly ashamed of our climate shitfuckery, so don't blame them. Well, except the dickheads who keep voting for us. For them, we reserve our biggest fuck you of all with our technology, not taxes plan, which means you pay for bullshit technologies that greenwash fossil fuel companies and they keep paying no taxes. That's the Australian way. We hope you enjoy this summit, and if it fails, don't forget to thank Scotty from Coal Fondling and all of us here at the Australian government. Allez-vous faire foutre? Aloha gai. Jesteś majkojowi. Authorised by the Department for blah blah blah.